everyone. My name is Rose Horowitz. I am a Pulitzer-nominated journalist and the founder of Woman to Follow. I'm thrilled to have my terrific guest, Irena Cronin, CEO of Infinite Retina, tonight with us. We will talk about AI and new technology very soon. Big shout out to my producer, Stefan Kaplan, or Spin It Social on Twitter. He's terrific, and he's the guy behind the scenes. And please join us on Facebook, Twitter, at Rose Horowitz 31, and Woman to Follow, LinkedIn, and my Woman to Follow YouTube channel. And I'd love it if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. And tonight we have the special excitement of also streaming to Irena Cronin's Twitter feed. So she's at Irena Cronin. You can text us, write in your questions to us on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and tell us where you're watching from, and tell us your questions, because we have a fabulous guest here tonight. Tell you a little about Irena. She's head of Infinite Retina, which is in Pasadena, and she began her career as a Wall Street analyst. She is one of the few women in tech helping companies implement artificial intelligence, augmented reality, spatial computing, and other technologies in their businesses. So let's welcome Irena. We're so excited to have you as a guest. Hi, Irena.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Your evening is just getting started in LA.
Yes. Very comfortable here. So yeah, there's so much to talk about. We could take up like 3 hours just talking about this stuff.
We can. And I guess my first question to you would be, we're obviously hearing a lot about AI every day. I saw somebody post on X, Twitter today, please, like, no more articles about AI, but it would be awesome if you could tell us in a nutshell sort of what we know about AI and why it's significant in a very broad way.
Okay, so actually AI has been around for quite a while, and the idea of AI has been around for even longer. Around the 2000s, it was suffering, and even though there are research scientists working on it, it was seen as a stepchild that kind of was behind, and nobody knew what was going to happen to it. Then in the 2000 teens, there was some resurgent interest in it, but it had to do with big data, which was very specific to large companies trying to figure out, how their operations are running. So very specific use. Now, last year, since October, generative AI has hit the scene with OpenAI, and there's several other companies that have come into this race. And generative AI has thrown a huge light on AI in general. However, most people don't know about the other uses of AI very much, because a lot of the talk has been about robots taking over the world in the future and jobs being taken over by AI. So there's a lot of talk about it, but not a lot about the utility and the practicality of it. So AI is extremely useful and very beneficial, actually. It's up to us human beings to figure out how to use it.
And just so we can identify, what were some of the ways? I think we talked about this a little bit, like when I watch a movie on Netflix or a show on Netflix, and this has been for, I would think, about 10 years, that Netflix, more than 10, 20.
Yeah.
Okay. So Netflix is saying to me, would you also like to watch this show?
Yeah.
Right? And
it's called a recommender system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very early kind of AI use where it tracks what you've watched before, and maybe some questions that you've answered when you first came on the app. And it tries to do a good job of matching what you like, or what the recommender system thinks that you like. And I mean, that has been refined, obviously, over time. It's gotten better. It's still not as personalized as people would like. I mean, Facebook uses it. I mean, almost everybody now, every company that's online tracks what you're buying, and they use it. So it's a very useful tool, but it's still not refined, because the kinds of things that it's tracking are not that specific to you. It might know that I like the color black or red. It might know that the last 5 pieces of clothing I bought were like this, and it just has those parceled kinds of information. So yeah, that a lot of people know about the recommender systems.
Okay. So when OpenAI burst on the scene with ChatGPT, how is that significantly different?
Wow. Okay. When it first came around, the people that first saw it, which were obviously the software engineers that were outside of the company, OpenAI, obviously the engineers there have seen it for a while, they couldn't believe what they were looking at. And it became like a frenzy to figure out how it works. And that's why even now you're saying stop with the AI. It's not stopping. I mean, so basically what generative AI does, and this is also tied to recommender systems in a way, it uses a data set that a human being gives it. Okay. And it trains on it in a certain way, and then it's kind of stops. And the human being stops then from having any impact on how that generative AI decides. The generative AI on its own figures out what to show you. So that could be text, that could be visual with a prompt, and now that's turning into 18-second videos. So what's really amazing about it is that that's why it's called generative AI. It generates it on its own. Yeah.
And what are some, you talked to me about some of the prompts you were giving to Midjourney, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
tell me what happened with that. If we're going to get into a little bit about the role of women and how much data there is about women, but what happened when you tried to give it information?
Yeah. I mean, this has not changed. So it's going to take a while. So basically, I just jumped in there and I wanted to see what I could create. I like to create art anyway, but this was for my business, and I wanted to get visuals, and it was awesome. I could create something in, 10 minutes. I could get something not actually as targeted as I want, but something that's acceptable. So I wanted to get business people together, a very simple kind of scene, business people together at a desk working, with a bigger desk or a few desks or whatever. So I just put in business people working at desks, and I got a whole bunch of men in suits with ties on computers, and no women at all. And I was like, oh, that's really strange. And they were all white. Okay. And I was thinking, oh, I know why this is happening, because the data set that it was fed, it believes that this is what I want to see. It goes by probability. And if a lot of the data set has a lot of white businessmen in it versus other kinds of business people, it's going to show you that. Okay. So that's a problem with generative AI, that the system that it works off is probability. And with text, it works on the proximity of certain words next to each other. So that's why you also get some funky results. But anyway, getting back to the business people. So I put in, okay, I got to refine my prompt better. So I put in business women and business men. Show me some business women and some business men. and working at desks. So up popped some businesswomen walking around in skirts, carrying something. They're not at desks, or like slivered on some stairs.
Okay.
And then we're at the desks.
So they're not doing the same work as men.
No, they're not. So it was a fight. I kept adding more and more stringent requirements, and it's true. If you are very specific, that could be a whole page. The prompt could be extremely long. You might get what you're looking for, but that's also a problem with generative AI right now, is that it shouldn't take that long. There's no UI that you could use to specify what you want to see and get it fairly quickly. It's now in a very experimental stage. And but even so, lots of people are jumping in and using it, especially artists.
And, if you look at the numbers, I think the most recent numbers I've seen from the World Economic Foundation and LinkedIn are from 2018 that say, only 22% of the people in AI are, the people in AI are women. And there's just a much smaller percentage of those who are in more senior positions.
That's not unusual. Yeah.
Are an exception, which is why I want you here. But, how are you going to get better data and, for that, the generative AI to come up when the women are not, women of color, women in general are not represented in the data sets? How can we change that?
It can even be changed today. If there is some kind of user interface, which could be made, but all the research scientists and the software engineers are working on other things to push this farther. And I'll explain where they're going right now, right after this. If they were interested in creating a user interface so that it would be easier for everybody to use, including, a 10-year-old or a 50-year-old or older, that's going to be the next stage, obviously. Then underneath that UI code that's there would be specifications of what you probably are looking for. So it puts a stop to the AI completely taking over with what probability it thinks what the probability it is on its own. Okay. So if that's done, it could actually be fixed today. So it's not going to be that long.
Why isn't there that, so many people have pointed this out, I'm looking at an article, very few women have a seat at the table, by Chris Stokel Walker. This is a UK publication, iNews. But, and she talks about, whether it's using AI to design buildings which are coded in with a traditionally male-focused bias, or to diagnose health issues where the majority of training data is likely to have been men because they are overrepresented in such data sets. The risk of layering AI into the real world can be enormous. So why isn't it, if there's this big imbalance, is it all because everyone is just racing with the technology rather than, but if the impact is so enormous, why aren't these companies stopping to say, hey, are we doing this the right way, the way it should be done ethically?
Okay, it's a very pat question. By the way, Chris is a man. He's a fantastic writer, and he's very open-minded.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say? Okay.
So let me try to parse that out in a couple of different ways. Okay, so basically, the data set, whatever data set it is, and I'm not thinking that any data set that any other group would use would be fantastically different than what OpenAI is using. And in fact, a lot of companies are using the OpenAI software and the chat and all that stuff as their basic underneath generative AI. So that data set is going to show you, it's going to reflect what the current culture is and the societal values, let's say. It's not only textual, you know, it's going to tell you textual stuff that also is very skewed, because the majority of what's there, there's a high probability that the AI thinks you want that because there's so much more of that stuff in there in a certain fashion. But then the visual aspect of it as well. So that's one issue. That could be fixed.
That's probability, really.
Yeah. Now, if you want to fix that, you can introduce different varieties of everything. People, you know, doing different things and et cetera, in all kinds of ways, by just adding that data. So actually, a lot of companies are using generative AI to go over all their documentation and everything and organizational stuff. So it can be narrowed down to work over a certain batch of data versus, you know, outside data.
Okay.
So if you introduce
the user's data, so the company's data in this case,
it's really, really useful. If you introduce data that includes the variety of people and everything, you'll get what you want when you put in that, you know, prompt. The problem is OpenAI is using data that's about 1.5 years old to begin with. Data is really hard to get by, and it's a lot. It's a lot of data. So you'd have to find another batch that was quite as large, or then you're going to end up being biased in another way. It's a extremely fine tuning kind of thing. There are people that are talking about using software engineers to actually go in and, as the AI is doing its stuff, tune it and fix it so that they could see what's happening and then, you know, decide where it should go. So that could probably work with their issues with that as well. So that's the main issue having to do with the data. Now, women in tech, and, you know, the percentage of women in AI, I mean, that even seems a little high for me. 22% is a very high number. That's
what have you heard it is, or?
Yeah, I just in general, women in tech are, you know, a much lower percentage overall.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about specific kind of jobs, like the engineer type jobs, and then the management jobs on top of that, that's quite sparse as well. So it's not only AI. And the same thing was said when people started getting really excited about VR. They were like, let's make this, you know, inclusive. It doesn't work because there's so much tide that comes in that is already there that pulls it in a certain way. Just organizational stuff that already exists. You'd have to really re-educate people in business about how they hire and follow it to make sure that it's done. And in the US, that's a little hard to do. I know in other countries, they actually, like some Scandinavian countries, they say you have to have this many women on your board. You just have to.
Yeah.
They tried to do something here in the US. It doesn't work. So
like it's supposed to be one woman at least on every board.
Yeah. So it has to be cultural. It can't be done by law, and it won't be done by law. No one will pass that law. So how does this change? Well, I think it changes with the family. Actually, as kids are growing up, I think parents have to be, and I think they are becoming better educated about kind of that those jobs are the highest paying jobs. And to me, they're the most interesting. I mean, yes, it's very hard. And if you want to become an entrepreneur and then a successful one, that's even harder. But the chances, becoming successful is also worth it. So I actually think it's if you get the children really early. And I know people in New York, I know you live in New York and I'm originally from New York, right? There are lots of people on the Upper West Side that have their 4-year-olds learning how to code. So that's interesting and it's good. And they could do it. Think about how they learn language, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I think once that happens, the educational system, which is a much harder nut to crack, I mean, seriously difficult. Maybe if the parents have put enough pressure, because they, in the end, especially if you're paying the school, they have a large say as to what the curriculum is, and they can make certain classes happen. So that's how I think it's going to work versus from the top down.
What about the role of educators, the government in pushing this forward? I know you're talking from the parents' perspective,
Yeah.
but if most public, if there's public education, then the government is funding that.
Yes. I don't think that there's been a lot of success. Yes, they can withhold the money, right? I was also at UCLA, so a really wonderful public college university. And there were times when they did threaten to withhold money for certain reasons. But I don't think that they would make that move. The politics are just unbelievable. Let's say we did get a president in there that actually spoke often about something like this. Maybe there's a chance that there would be some top down, but that takes a lot of political courage to really talk about that continuously and make people want to do it. So a very charismatic person, a wise, charismatic person that actually cares, right? So I don't have a lot of faith in the top-down way of doing it and enforcement, basically. Yeah.
Okay. What's the frontier that we should all know about in terms of where we are next? What you've talked about spatial vision. So give us a little primer on that and how that could be the next frontier, where we are now with that.
So the term is spatial computing, and it was a term that was used, but not very popular, and it was by academic people. Robert Scoble and I wrote a book called The Infinite Retina that came out in 2020 by PACT, where we talked a lot about spatial computing. And the idea was that there were a number of industries that were tied together by similar kinds of technology. And it has to do with 3D computer vision and the capability of being able to move through space. So that would include a Tesla. That would include a robot who has to make their way up the stairs, VR headset, AR headset, AR glasses, anything that has to calibrate and understand the environment to be able to so that people can be able to do something in 3D. That's when you need spatial computing. So the thing with generative AI that's really exciting about the spatial computing aspect is that they're now working on 3D. So like really good 3D. There's really bad 3D right now because it's really, really hard. So 3D visuals, then 3D video that you would be able to possibly move through. That's the nirvana of people that are into the holodeck, basically.
Yeah.
The Star Trek.
I saw on your feed there was someone, I don't know who he was, but he posted, as though he was maybe in front of a college and how he was turning around and, as though it was
Yeah.
So, and I'm not an expert, so I can't tell you what phase he was, but, how fast is that, every day things are changing, like, are we seeing something different today, from 2 weeks ago from these, researchers?
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful, actually. I could spend all day reading and following it. Twitter is the place where a lot of engineers have chosen to post their work and talk about what they're doing. So, and that's amazing. So you know where to go to find this information. But in order to keep up with it, I mean, I've spent like days just reading on Twitter and like talking and to people and all that kind of stuff, following up with them. Because every day, actually, for the last number of months, there have been changes. So recently, I was talking to Robert. He likes this technology called NERF, okay, neural radiance fields, okay. Basically, what you do is you take your camera, you take a number of shots, kind of like around something. This technology takes those shots and makes it 3D. So that, and the AI fills in the gaps of the spots that you're missing. So obviously when you're taking all the pictures, there's going to be lots of stuff missing, right? So that's where the AI comes in. But it's very limited right now. Basically from whichever aspect you were standing, that's where it stays. You can't go up and down. You can't, walk into, you can't do anything except from that particular spot. So there have been some commercials that have used it, and it's still kind of early with that. And I said to him, I don't think that's going to be the technology that's going to be the one that's going to make it. Maybe something built on it, or something like that. And like that afternoon, they were talking about 3D Gaussian splints. Okay, so I don't want to get too technical here, but basically what that does, it creates something like a wireframe of space. Okay, so it's more flexible, let's say. The kinds of, the way that it sees the world is a lot of different particles that are joined together. Okay.
Oh, I think that person posted like these, it was almost like a pointillist view of layers of what he created.
Yes.
Something like
so
that. Yeah.
It's super flexible, so that now if I want to, go down, I can go down. If I want to go farther, a close up, like in Blade Runner, what they would do is show it, get closer, the detail's amazing. I could get close to the building. I could get farther away, and there's not a lot of artifacts, which are like little kinds of errors that are obvious in what's created. So, but I also don't think that that's the last thing that's going to happen. What everybody wants, including artists and commercial people and enterprise, they want to have 3D where they can manipulate it. They could decide what aspect they want to see it from, that they could change stuff in it, and the AI, tell the AI how to exactly change it. But 3D is difficult. But I think that's where it's going and where everybody wants it to go.
And that's because it hasn't been done before, or there's a real need for that, or it's not being done. The technology is not there for advertising industry, or in the, to do it this easily in the film industry.
The reason why I think people want 3D is a very human reason. So yeah, okay. So if you had an article of clothing or a product or something, and you wanted to show it in 3D, yeah, that'll help sales. Okay, so you might say there's some basis in that kind of thing, but I think there's a much deeper reason why people want 3D. They want to have control over their environment. They want to feel like they have their own little world. It's kind of like escapist, imaginary kind of stuff, imagination. So if you can, let's say you have your family over, and it's a big celebration, and so it's multi-generational family, and they're having a wonderful time, and it's beautiful outside, and all kinds of things are going. You were able to create that scene in 3D, right? so that you could see very clearly everything from the bottom of their shoes to the eyelashes that they have, right? And you were able to save that for the future. So 30 years later, you could look at it in 3D and put it life size as if those people are next to you. I mean, this is just
amazing, right?
Yeah. So I think that's the need, to be able to have some kind of control over reality, in a matter of fact. Yeah.
Oh. We have some, I think, questions. Let's see. Well, my producer has a question, so let's see if he wants to come on and ask the question. Hi, Stefan.
Hi, Irena. How are you?
Good.
So I have a question. So, you know, it dawned upon me when you were just talking about certain things. I was watching a video, it must have been on YouTube or something, and there was a very popular DJ in Europe that was at this big concert, and you know, DJs now have their own concerts, so it's pretty amazing. And in the middle of it, he actually started talking as if he was Eminem.
Yeah.
The artist Eminem. Where do you see this going in terms of, you know, the rights to doing things like that? And, you know, all of a sudden he's talking and sounding like Eminem. I mean, the proprietary, you know, aspect of all this, the legal rights to all of this with musicians and other things. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question.
All right, I'm going off. That was my question.
Thank you, Stefan.
I'm currently a writer for an extremely large law firm that is very interested and has clients that are already dealing with these issues, you know, in entertainment and sports, etc. Right? So it's super interesting that in talking with the lawyers, it's uncharted territory. There really is nothing like this that has happened before. You could look towards, you know, privacy laws and all kinds of laws that about rights and all that kind of stuff. But there's so many different aspects of this that, so for example, let's say he's talking about Eminem, right? Let's say I didn't copy Eminem at all. I said, make it in the style of Eminem. So I'm just saying, you know, Eminem's style is out there. Why can't I just not create something that's kind of like him? Is that something that should be, you know, a right that the artist has, that therefore he would get royalties for? I mean, it's a very interesting and difficult area to decide. I mean, once the legal profession and this has to be like some governmental regulation in there decides, then that'll be answering the question. It'll be fine-tuned as we go along for other things. But right now, it's very gray. And of course, it's kind of a dual-edged sword, because the Hollywood studios would love to use generative AI to create likenesses of the actors and actresses and hold them in perpetuity. I mean, that's what the strike is about now, that's been ongoing. And they actually provided a document that said that that's what they wanted them to sign. So that's what they would like to have their own production companies, but have no people creating those things anymore except the technologists and the AI. Maybe that's what future Hollywood actually looks like, and maybe that's even what the gaming industry ends up looking like. But
very, very scary. Very scary.
You know, even if they wanted to do it, it's not ready. It's quite, there's quite a lot of hokey stuff going on, and the quality wouldn't be great. Give it 10 years and it would be it's going to be very possible, and it might actually happen. So I don't know what to say. There is really nothing that could stop companies from doing this. The dual-edged sword, though, is, let's say I'm an individual and I decided I wanted to make my own AI film, and let's say it's really easy to do. I in the I want
Okay, sorry, bros. Pardon, folks. We're having a few technical difficulties. We're working on them right now. Irene is going to try to refresh her screen and come back on. She seems to be having a glitch. We'll be right back with her. Hold on one second, Rose.
Okay. Irena, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Can you
All
hear?
right. Let's hope.
Yeah.
I can. So I think you were talking about the issue of new copyright, that we don't have these kind of copyright issues, or Hollywood in 10 years,
Yeah.
what that's going to look like.
Oh, you didn't hear all of that. Okay, so it probably was recorded, but anyway, so in about 10 years, I believe that actually the Hollywood studios will be able to do this, and they will do it. Especially now, since everything's going streaming anyway. It'll be fairly easy to create a movie or episodic kind of show with characters that were created that look very real. Being able to move the 3D space, like I'm talking about, you can actually make a 3D show, which is something that I think that Apple wants to do with their Vision Pro, by the way, headset. And that also has to do with sports, like having 3D sports. So basically, you're there with the athletes while they're playing in 3D. So these are dreams, but I think those are the dreams that will come true. So those laws do have to be created, and those contracts have to be more regularized versus having one contract say one thing and the other one saying something else, because that's a danger. I think that will happen. Once that happens, and I think it will probably favor business. That makes sense to me, just in terms of how things work, because these are huge businesses. We're not only talking about Hollywood, like I said, we're talking about sports, we're talking about all kinds of other businesses that use likenesses and need to make video and all that kind of stuff. It's just, things are going to change,
So if I watch a show, Friends, let's say,
yeah,
you take Friends and you say, okay, well, we're going to make this for 2035.
yeah,
So we're going to put all different Friends. And we're
yeah,
going to make it diverse, and we're going to change the actors, and we're going to put in these new actors. And sort of, you can make it 3D and create an episode of Friends in 2035.
Absolutely. There was a very funny experiment. It was purposely really hokey, of Seinfeld, where they made it kind of pixelated.
Yeah.
So the actors were like moving like little robots and stuff like that, but that was all AI generated. And it was an experiment. The AI was trying to be funny, and a lot of the times it wasn't funny at all. So, but I think millions of people actually saw that because it was different. So like I said, it's gonna take a while, but yeah, I think it's extremely possible to do. Yeah.
And will that be for something like creating comedy? Will AI be able to create comedy?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things about that. It's not only comedy, it has to do with deeper stories. Maybe even, there's lots of movies out there that aren't perfect, but they're beloved, If the AI made it, and I even think this will happen in 2035, you can tell the AI, insert some noise here, certain kinds of unevenness or whatever. So you have to give it direction, but still then it's not the same thing as a human being who is working through artistically what they're doing with a group of people. And also the comedy thing, understanding comedy Like what that comedy is very difficult. So I think that'll take a little longer for that not to be bad.
Mhm.
You know, this is a very long story in terms of, let's say, philosophers talking about how media can change culture. So if
Mhm.
you go back to the like 1930s, you have philosophers saying, you know, we have to be careful what kind of movies we show people because that's the culture we're going to create, and you shouldn't popularize movies because that's what their minds are going to be about and all that kind of stuff. So huge movements, and I kind of feel like
Well,
there's kind of
fascists use it too. Fascists use movies.
yes, that's right. That's right. That's what they did. But there's a kind of middling ground. So it might happen for a number of years that the AI creates things that are just acceptable, right? They're not fantastic, but
Mhm.
they're just acceptable, and people will watch it because there'll be a lot of them. So there'll be a lot of average stuff. We're not going to hit the high notes. You know, The Godfather and a whole bunch of wonderful 70s movies that we haven't hit high notes on even now, right? So that's the issue that I see. I mean, I'm not going to worry too much about it because if that happens, inevitably there will be creative people still. The creative people are born every day that will look at it and go, hey, we have to do something here. Let's make it happen. And maybe there'll be new technology that's created, you know, that will help creative people do that.
Okay. When we spoke, you mentioned this an ad for Google Lens,
Yeah.
and it used there's an actress, I'm forgetting her name, but I saw it, and so we have a short clip of that, and I thought we'd play that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from she's coming out of the Barbie house. So
Yes.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. In Barbie land, everything makes sense. But here in the real world, I'm always like, what is that? What is that? Thankfully, with the Google app, I can search it with Lens. Oh, a chihuahua. What up? It even
okay, we don't want to
Yeah.
play too much and get any copyright. Um, it's very amusing. Like, so is this Lens something that is new, or that kind of idea, or
It's not new.
Mhm.
It's using traditional AI.
Mhm.
Now it could possibly use generative AI to fill in some, let's say, the underside of the animal is important. You can't
Mm.
see it. It
Mhm.
fills that in and decides what that animal is, or thing, or
Mhm.
plant, or whatever. Um, so Google has had this for a number of years already. Google is funny. They don't commercialize a lot. This is like very unusual for them to do
Yeah.
this because they want to make a name in AI now, right?
Uh-huh.
But so they would occasionally say, oh, there's Google Lens, you know, you need to try it out. It's good for your kids, you know, to figure out what these things are in the world, right? But
Mhm.
it didn't work very well. Like in the beginning, it was like 30% was it would, you know, identify 30%, and the other stuff it just didn't understand what it was. It showed you
Mhm.
something else or whatever.
Mhm.
So it took a number of years where it was slowly getting better. Now it's really, really nice.
Mhm.
I mean, I do have issues if you go into your garden and you know, you look, you put it on top of a certain plant or whatever. It's still, you know, that's very particular, especially if you don't have like a garden variety plant. It's like
Mhm.
a exotic thing. It
Yeah.
could possibly not know what that is, or you
I
haven't.
have a cousin who's a botanist, and we were at New York Public Library, and maybe a year ago it didn't work
Yeah,
because we knew what the plant was, and she knows the Latin name. But I'd say in that year it was much improved. Like it
yeah,
wasn't, and they weren't garden variety,
yeah.
flowers. So I
Um,
guess that's what's changing so quickly, like you said, with the Google lenses, is that the
mhm.
speed of change is so quick. and the improvement is so quick.
I have a friend who's an artist, though, and remember, everything, it all has to do with the data set. You know, all of this is the data set. Now, the data set could be added to. The thing with Google Lens, it fixes itself, unlike ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't go in and recalibrate every time someone puts in a prompt, which a lot of people thought it did, but it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of AI, you know, it learns basically on its own. And I have a friend who's an artist who loves to collect antiques and go antiquing and stuff. And she brings something back and she says, could you tell me what this is or who made it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, okay, I'll try Google Lens. And there's some other ways, you know, you could try to identify it. And it might never get who that artist is because it will only find artists that are in the data set, or someone somehow matched something and it figured out that was the artist. Picked something that was remote and they said, oh, that's what you mean, that kind of thing. But it's gonna, I don't know when. It's not like a God that knows, you know, everything and, you know, everywhere. There's still going to be holes for certain things that it will not know. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little about, you know, your background. Let's hear about, like, did you always want to go into business? What did you, when you were 10, you know, what did you think you'd become?
Yeah, I did always want to go into business. I'm someone that really likes math. I like Agatha Christie and puzzles, and I want to figure things out. So I'm really, really analytical. I could spend 2 days trying to figure out one little thing. So yeah, it really gets me excited. So I went to undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania. I studied economics. I loved it. I went to work on Wall Street for about 8 years as an equity analyst. And basically what that entails is getting a batch of stocks from a certain industry and following the companies, talking to the CEOs and other relevant people at a quarterly basis, or sometimes much, you know, more frequently, depending on what's going on with those companies, and trying to predict they're public companies, trying to predict what kind of announcements they were going to make for their quarterlies, both quarterly and annual reports. And then try to see, figure out, like, by the mosaic method, which is you take an understanding of a lot of different information and you piece it together, and then you that's basically how the human brain, they think, works anyway. But so that's what it was all about. And I did a whole bunch of different industries. I did computers and autos and steel, and just so I understand a lot of how big corporations work. Then I went back and I got my MBA at the University of Southern California, and I got a master's degree in East Asian Studies with a focus on China, on modern China. And I came out and I worked for companies to value now private companies. So now I get how entrepreneurial companies could be valued, which was really, really, really useful, because the public companies, you know, there's a lot more information. Private ones, it's really hard to understand unless you have some kind of methodology. So I did that for a while, and I also love languages. So I was, you might be like, well, how much education does she have? Well, I was working at the same time while I was doing ancient Chinese at UCLA. And I did that for a while, and I entered the PhD program. And then a fluke happened in 2015. I was on Facebook, and I decided to create a group centered around VR. I had already created a group centered around philosophy because I was also doing philosophy, Chinese philosophy. And that worked out really well. And I said, okay, and I gave it to the people. I said, okay, I've done enough here. I got like 3,000 people in it. So I was really bored. It was around Christmas. And I said, what can I do? And I was just like, there seems to be like this VR thing is happening. So, like, you know, I got a bunch of friends that do VR. I've got VCs. I've got people in business. Why don't I put them all together? And that was amazing. That started something that I never had any indication or preparation for, never even thought I was going to get into. After a few months, there was a group in LA that contacted me and said, you can help us figure out how Hollywood studios can do VR. I said, yeah, I know the technologies. I also have a technical degree from MS and an MS degree from NYU in computer. So yeah, so I pieced it all together. I know how the technology works well enough. I understand how the business works. So I did that for a while. I you know, met with a whole bunch of Hollywood studio people, and they're also the software people and all kinds of creatives. And that was amazing. But then I decided I don't only want to work in Hollywood. You know, it's got its own stuff, all its own thing. I want to now become more broader and work with for consumer types of things and other kinds of enterprises. And I started a company that did consultancy for that. So that's basically how it started. And I decided I'm not really into VR. After like 3 years of getting into it, I said, no, I don't think VR is where it's at. Back in 2017, I was like, it's AR. And Robert Scoble was like, it's AR too. And he's like, it's going to happen soon. I said, no, it's not going to happen soon, but I'm still in it. And we're talking about AI plus AR in 2017. So, and then spatial computing. So that's how it just happened, and I fell in love with it, and it's extremely relevant. So yeah.
That's great. Fascinating. And one of the things I always ask my guests is, you know, I ask them who are their woman to follow. So let's talk about that. Who would you name?
So Kathy Hackle, who is with a company called Journey. She's fantastic. She's worked in a number of really good companies. She's excellent at marketing, and she understands technology. So, and I've known her, I think, since 2017. We were also on a panel together at AWE once, and she's fantastic. Yeah.
Great.
Caitlin. Okay, so Caitlin is extremely unusual. So she does hardware, and she does AR hardware at Meta, very technical, and works as the head of it. So she has a lot of men under her working for her, and it's fantastic. Her ideas are really wonderful. And I've followed her, and we've had, you know, conversations, like textual conversations and research types of things that we did back and forth at one time, and I'm just in awe of her.
Great.
Now, Sarah Guo, so she recently started her own VC company called Conviction. The status of women in venture capital is probably, in terms of percentage, there are fewer women VCs than there are in technology, you know, or engineers. So we're talking like a very small percentage of women actually doing VC. Now,
Like
that's
7% or something like that.
yeah, and people leave. You know, they get into it and they're like, okay, I'm not going where I want to go, and they just go somewhere else to do something else. It is very hard, but that's not the reason why women are not there. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and we could do a whole show on why that's the case. It has its own set of reasoning and history and all that kind of stuff. But she's really, I've been watching her for a number of years, and she's made a lot of good plays in terms of, you know, companies that she picked. And this is her company. So that's great.
Okay. I see she has a big following. So, you know, for our listeners, our viewers, you know, you're one of the few women in a male-dominated field. What takeaways, what advice would you give for others who are thinking about going into tech and AI and these latest technologies?
Okay, so I'd say arm yourself with as much technical expertise and understanding as possible. So don't worry about whether or not you're going to make a, all that kind of stuff. Don't even think about it. Just learn how to code, learn how the logic works, learn about the environment that tech exists in, and you'll be prepared. Of course, there's going to be a lot of stuff. I mean, I worked on Wall Street. I'd say Wall Street was a really good primer for working in tech. In fact, it could be even harder in a way, because what's acceptable on Wall Street would not be acceptable in tech in terms of behavior and all that kind of stuff. It's still kind of shielded from the way culture has changed in the United States. Yeah, so that's what I would say. I know a lot of people would say grow a thick skin and all this kind of stuff. I mean, whoever the person is, that's who they are. They're not going to suddenly, up and change their personality, and you can't do it anyway. So the best way to do it is just arm yourself with as much knowledge and that you can, tech knowledge, and just do it.
That's great. Sounds like great advice. Thank you. Very wise. And it looks like that's something that you have done with all of your studying and languages, and sounds like you have mastered a lot of fields in your career.
Thank you. Most of it was because I was bored. It's been great, just learning new things. But yeah, I think women do have a great future in tech. It's just going to take more time and more women in numbers doing tech.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anne Arriaga is saying, thank you for a very informative show. She's from New York City. So I really want to thank you. It's been a great show. If you could wait for me, I'm going to sign off, and just wait for me a minute. I'll meet you in the green room.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, that was really a great discussion with Irena. I learned so much. I think I have to go back and listen again, so I'll take it in. But I thank everyone thank you so much for joining me. It was my honor to have Irena and to have all of you join me. Thanks for your engagement. And we will be back. Women to Follow is a movement to amplify women's voices. Very happy to do that with each of the women that I interview. And I will see you next time. Thank you.